Commander Lee Jun rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the massive screen surrounding him in Earth's deep space monitoring station. Bravo. The night shift was usually quiet, with only the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from distant sensor arrays. But tonight was different. Tonight would change everything. The priority alert screamed across his console, painting the dark room in flashing red light. Jun's coffee mug slipped from his hand as he saw the origin point. Sector 7 Alpha. Every human in the galaxy knew that. Designation. It was the Forbidden Zone, marked in blood red on every star chart, with warnings that made even the bravest pilots change course. Lieutenant Park Min looked up from her station, her face pale in the emergency lighting. She was young, barely 2 years out of the academy, and had never seen a real crisis alert before. Her hand shook slightly as she worked the holographic controls, trying to clean up the signal that was crackling with interference and what sounded like weapons fire. "Sir, this is bad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "We're getting a distress call from the Galactic Council vessel Harmony's Light. They're screaming about total fleet destruction." Jun felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Council didn't panic. These were the same aliens who had survived 1,000 years of peace, who had technologies that made human science look like stone tools. If they were screaming for help, something had gone terribly wrong. The transmission was breaking up, filled with static and what sounded like explosions in the background. Through the chaos, Jun could hear the alien voices, high-pitched and desperate, speaking in their universal translator language. They were begging, pleading for anyone to help them. 27 ships destroyed in just 3 hours. An entire exploration fleet wiped out by something they called the enemy from the void. Parkman looked at her commander with wide eyes. "They're asking for immediate military assistance. They say whatever attacked them is still out there, hunting the survivors." Jun didn't hesitate. He grabbed the emergency communicator that connected directly to Fleet Command on Earth, while other galactic civilizations would form committees and hold debates that lasted weeks. Humans had learned long ago that sometimes you had to act first and ask questions later. "Priority Alpha emergency," he barked into the device. "Alien fleet under attack in Sector 7 Alpha, requesting immediate military response." The response came back in less than 30 seconds. Admiral Kimte's voice was calm but deadly serious. "Confirmed, Commander. We're mobilizing the entire Sol Defense Fleet. Those aliens called for help, and humans don't ignore distress calls." Within minutes, every military base in the solar system was buzzing with activity. Sailors ran to their ships, pilots climbed into fighters, and engineers worked frantically to prepare humanity's entire military force for immediate deployment. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. This was first contact with something that could destroy an advanced alien fleet in hours. The galaxy was about to learn. What happened when someone threatened the innocent and humans decided to respond? Luna Station had never seen anything like it. The massive orbital facility, normally a quiet research outpost overlooking Earth's moon, suddenly transformed into a war machine. Thousands of military personnel flooded the corridors, their boots echoing against metal floors as they rushed to their assigned vessels. The peaceful scientific station became humanity's launching point for the largest military deployment in their short galactic history. Captain Yunso stood in the main briefing hall, watching his squadron commanders filed in from across the solar system. These were Earth's best pilots. Veterans who had earned their ranks fighting pirates and hostile alien raiders in the outer colonies. But today, they faced something completely different. Something that had icily destroyed ships far more advanced than anything humans possessed. The holographic display behind Yoon showed the devastating remains of the Council fleet. Twisted metal fragments drifted in space, each piece telling the story of a quick and brutal defeat. The alien ships hadn't just been destroyed. They had been systematically dismantled by an enemy that understood exactly how to kill them. "Listen carefully," Yoon began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived 3 major space battles. 12 hours ago, the Galactic Council lost 27 ships to an unknown enemy. These weren't cargo vessels or civilian transports. These were their best military ships, with crews that had centuries of combat experience. The room fell silent. Every officer understood what that meant. If the Council's advanced technology couldn't stop this enemy, what chance did humanity have? Commander Ohan, a grizzled veteran with scars across his face from a pirate raid, raised his hand. Captain, shouldn't we wait for backup? The Council has thousands of ships across the galaxy. Maybe we should let them handle this. Yoon's expression turned cold. She had served alongside Council forces before and knew exactly how they operated. The Council will spend 3 weeks forming committees to discuss the threat. Then they'll spend another 2 weeks debating which ships to send. By then, those survivors will be dead. She clicked a button, and the display changed to show humanity's military doctrines, strategies developed during Earth's brutal history of constant warfare. We're implementing Deathworld Protocol 7, total deployment, maximum aggression, no hesitation. The alien observers stationed at Luna Station watched this preparation with growing alarm. Ambassador Veltar, a tall, peaceful creature from a civilization that hadn't fought a war in 500 years, approached Admiral Kim as the old soldier supervised the fleet preparations. Admiral Kim, the ambassador said in his soft, musical voice, surely this response is excessive? Perhaps a small scouting force would be more appropriate? You're mobilizing your entire military for what might be a simple rescue operation. Kim stopped inspecting a fighter squadron and turned to face the alien diplomat. His weathered face showed the kind of hardness that only came from growing up on a planet where everything tried to kill you. Ambassador, you don't understand how Deathworlders think, Kim said quietly. Your people evolved on a paradise world where the biggest threat was bad weather. We evolved on Earth, where every day was a fight for survival. He gestured toward the thousands of human soldiers preparing their weapons and checking their equipment. When someone calls for help, we don't send scouts to investigate. We don't form committees to debate. We send everything we have, and we make sure the threat never hurts anyone again. The ambassador watched in stunned silence as humanity prepared for total war. The human fleet materialized from hyperspace, expecting to find a battle. Instead, they found a tomb. Space itself seemed wounded here, filled with the twisted remains of what had once been the galaxy's most advanced warships. The wreckage stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, creating a metal graveyard that told the story of a massacre. Admiral Kim stood on the bridge of Soul's Vengeance, his flagship staring at the destruction through the main viewport. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The Council ships hadn't just been destroyed, they had been carved apart with surgical precision. Each hole showed the same strange patterns, geometric cuts that looked almost artistic in their brutal efficiency. Lieutenant Nakyoung worked frantically at her sensor station, her fingers flying over the controls as she searched for survivors. The young officer had joined the fleet straight from the academy, full of excitement about humanity's role in the galaxy. Now her face was pale as she processed the scale of the devastation. Sir, I'm detecting weak life signs from the Harmony's light, she reported, her voice barely steady. Emergency power only. Hull breaches on 17 levels. They're dying. Fast. Kim didn't hesitate. Launch all rescue pods immediately. Get medical teams over there now. He turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. Form a protective perimeter while we evacuate survivors. As human rescue teams swarmed over the crippled alien vessel, Captain Yunso led her tactical specialists through the wreckage field. Her job was to understand what had happened here, to figure out what kind of enemy could do this to ships that were generations ahead of human technology. The debris told a terrifying story. The alien weapons had barely fired before being silenced. Defensive shields had failed within minutes. Most disturbing of all, the damage patterns showed that the enemy had known exactly where to strike each ship for maximum effect. The first survivors they brought aboard were barely conscious, their alien physiology struggling with severe injuries and trauma. But Elder Counselor Threnek, despite his wounds, insisted on speaking with the human commanders immediately. Yoon found the old alien in the medical bay, connected to machines that were keeping him alive. His species looked like tall, graceful birds with feathered crests and large, intelligent eyes. Now those eyes were filled with a terror that seemed to age him centuries. Captain Threnak whispered, his voice crackling through the universal. Translator, you must leave this place immediately. It will return when they detect your presence. Who are they? Yoon asked, pulling up a chair beside the medical bed. We call them the Void Shapers, the elder said, his alien hand trembling. As he gripped Yoon's arm, they are not alive as we understand life. They are machines, but not built by any civilization we know. They consume entire star systems, turning matter into more of themselves. Threnok's breathing became labored as he continued. They learn from every battle, adapt to every strategy. We use formations perfected over 1,000 years of warfare. Tactics that had never failed us. They studied our movements for mere minutes, then destroyed us as if we were children playing with toys. Captain Yoon leaned forward, and the alien noticed something strange in her expression. Her eyes held a cold calculation that seemed almost predatory. Elder, that's your problem right there. You fought them like civilized beings following rules of war. I don't understand, Threnak said weakly, before Yoon could explain. Lieutenant Nakyun's voice crackled over the ship's intercom, filled with urgent fear. Admiral, we have massive energy signatures approaching. Whatever killed the Council, fleet is coming back, and they're bringing friends. While the alien survivors huddled in the medical bays, weeping for their lost comrades and tending to their wounds. The human command staff gathered around the tactical table with an entirely different purpose. They weren't mourning, they were hunting. The conference room aboard Soul's Vengeance had been transformed into a war planning center, with holographic displays showing every scrap of data recovered from the destroyed Council ships. Lieutenant Colonel Beek Jin, a thin man with sharp eyes and graying hair, had spent the last 6 hours analyzing the enemy's attack patterns. His specialty was battlefield intelligence, finding weaknesses where others saw only strength. As the senior staff assembled around him, he looked more excited than worried. I've got good news and bad news, Beek announced, manipulating the holographic display to show the sequence of the Council fleet's destruction. The bad news is that these Void Shapers are incredibly advanced and powerful. The good news is that they're completely predictable. The display showed the enemy attack in slow motion. Each Void Shaper vessel moved with mechanical precision, striking at optimal angles for maximum damage while taking minimal risk. Their formations were perfect mathematical arrangements designed for efficiency. Watch this, Beek continued, highlighting the enemy movements. Every single engagement follows the same pattern. They analyze enemy capabilities, calculate the most efficient attack vector, adapt to defensive measures, then execute with perfect coordination. It's textbook artificial intelligence warfare. Captain Yoon leaned forward, studying the data with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. She had fought eye-controlled defense systems before, during the colony wars, and recognized the telltale signs of programmed behavior. Machines following complex programming, she said with growing confidence. But programming has limitations. They can only respond to scenarios their creators anticipated. Admiral Kim stood at the head of the table, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he absorbed the analysis. Around him, his senior officers waited for his assessment. These were men and women who had earned their positions through decades of combat against pirates, hostile aliens, and the harsh realities of space warfare. So they've never faced an enemy willing to accept catastrophic losses for tactical advantage, Kim said slowly. Every opponent they've encountered has tried to minimize casualties and preserve resources. Exactly, sir, Beek confirmed. Council fleet tried to retreat and regroup when they started taking heavy losses. Standard military doctrine for any rational commander. The Void Shapers adapted to counter their withdrawal, then hunted them down systematically. Commander O'Dade Han, a scarred veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, studied the enemy formation data with a grim smile. Sir, if we're willing to sacrifice our outer squadrons in coordinated ramming attacks, we can punch through their defensive screen and hit their command vessels directly. The casual discussion of sacrificial tactics caused a stir among the alien survivors who had been listening from the medical bay. Elder Threnok, despite his injuries, managed to hobble into the conference room with the help of a walking aid. Admiral Kim, the elder said, his voice filled with alarm. Surely you cannot be considering a direct assault? These creatures have consumed 17 entire star systems. It destroyed civilizations that had millions of years to perfect their military strategies. Kim turned to face the alien elder, his expression calm but determined. I appreciate your concern, but you need to understand something about humans.
Ow.
We didn't evolve on a peaceful world where cooperation and efficiency were the keys to survival. He gestured toward the tactical display showing Earth's military doctrine. Strategies born from countless wars on a planet where everything tried to kill its inhabitants. We evolved on a death world where the only way to survive was to be more vicious and unpredictable than everything trying to eat us. We don't fight to win efficiently. We fight to ensure our enemies can never threaten anyone ever again. Bridge of Souls' vengeance fell silent as the first wave of Void Shapers appeared on the long-range sensors. Captain Lee Young's squadron was positioned at the front of the human formation. 12 small destroyers that looked like toys compared to the massive geometric vessels approaching them. The alien machines moved in perfect synchronization. There are dark holes reflecting no light as they glided through space with deadly purpose. Enemy contact in 30 seconds. Lieutenant Nakyung reported from her sensor station. Her voice steady despite the tension filling the air. Void Shaper Vanguard consists of 47 vessels, each one 3 times the mass of our destroyers. Kim watched the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had made peace with what was about to happen. Around him, his bridge crew prepared for what every military analyst would call a suicide mission. The humans were outnumbered 4-1. Facing an enemy that had never lost a battle, Captain Lee Young's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship at the front of the formation. Admiral, initiating standard engagement protocols. All ships maintaining formation and preparing defensive positions. The Void Shapers responded exactly as Lieutenant Colonel Beak had predicted. Their vessels spread into a perfect encirclement pattern, moving with mathematical precision to surround the human squadron. Each alien ship took its position with mechanical efficiency, creating an inescapable trap that had destroyed countless fleets before. For 3 minutes, engagement proceeded according to every military textbook ever written. The human ships maintained their defensive formation, firing at optimal ranges while trying to minimize casualties. The Void Shapers adapted to their tactics in real time, gradually tightening the noose around the outnumbered human vessels then. Admiral Kim spoke 2 words that changed everything: Chaos Delta. The transformation was instantaneous and shocking. The neat human formation exploded outward like a bomb going off, the ship suddenly accelerating in directions that defied all military logic. Captain Lee Young's destroyer spun wildly to the left, directly into the path of enemy fire, while his wingman dove straight down at a suicidal angle. That should have been impossible in zero gravity, Captain Yoon's destroyer. Inchin's Fury suddenly broke from the formation and accelerated directly toward the center of the Void Shaper encirclement. Her ship's hull began taking massive damage from enemy weapons, but instead of retreating, she pushed forward even faster. The alien observers watching from the medical bay gasped as they saw her vessel's armor, plates peeling away under the intense fire. She's going to die, Elder Threnok whispered in horror. But Captain Yoon wasn't dying, she was hunting. As her destroyer tore through the enemy formation, her weapons targeted not the heavily armored hulls of the Void Shaper vessels, but the delicate sensor arrays and communication nodes that allowed them to coordinate their attacks. Her ship was falling apart around her, but every second she stayed alive. She was blinding and deafening her enemies. Lieutenant Nakyung stared at her tactical display in amazement. The Void Shapers, programmed to respond to logical military tactics, were struggling to adapt to the human assault. Their artificial intelligence kept trying to predict the next human move, but there was no pattern to follow. The humans were fighting like wild animals, throwing themselves at their enemies with no regard for military doctrine or self-preservation. Sir, the enemy adaptation protocols are failing, Nakyung reported, her voice filled with excitement and disbelief. They can't process our attack patterns. Their response time is increasing with each engagement. On the main screen, the impossible was happening. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, The human squadron was not only surviving, the encounter they were winning. Void Shaper vessels, confused by the chaotic human tactics, were beginning to fire on each other. As they tried to track targets that moved in completely unpredictable ways, Elder Threnak watched the battle with growing horror and assassination. "Admiral, your people are destroying themselves just to hurt the enemy." Kim's expression remained grim as he watched another human destroyer sacrifice itself to eliminate a Void Shaper command vessel. "No, Elder, they're winning." The moment of truth arrived at exactly 0800 hours ship time. Captain Li Young sat in the command chair of his destroyer, watching the approaching Void Shaper vanguard through the main viewport. His squadron of 12 human vessels looked pathetically small against the 47 alien war machines gliding toward them like mechanical death itself. "All ships maintain standard formation," Li commanded over the fleet communication system. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Every human pilot knew what was coming next, and they had volunteered anyway. The Void Shapers moved with the cold precision of advanced artificial intelligence. Their dark, geometric hulls reflected no starlight as they spread into a perfect encirclement pattern. Each enemy vessel took its predetermined position with mathematical accuracy, creating a trap that had destroyed hundreds of alien fleets before the humans arrived. For the first few minutes, the battle proceeded exactly like every engagement the Void Shapers had ever fought. The human ships maintained their defensive positions, firing their weapons at optimal ranges while trying to protect each other from enemy attacks. It was textbook space combat, the kind taught in every military academy across the galaxy. The Void Shapers analyzed the human tactics in real time, their artificial minds calculating the most efficient way to destroy each vessel while taking minimal damage. Their weapons began focusing fire on the lead ships, planning to eliminate the human squadron piece by piece with ruthless efficiency. Then Admiral Kim's voice cut through the communication channels like a blade. "All ships implement chaos pattern. Delta, what happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries." The neat human formation didn't just break apart, it exploded outward like a bomb detonating in space. Ships that had been flying in orderly lines suddenly scattered in every direction, some diving straight down, while others spun wildly to the left or right. Captain Li Young's destroyer suddenly broke from its position and accelerated directly into the heaviest enemy fire. His ship's shields flared bright blue as they absorbed massive damage, but instead of retreating, he pushed his engines to maximum power and charged deeper into the enemy formation. Captain Yoon's destroyer, Inchin's Fury, performed a maneuver that should have been impossible. She rolled her ship completely upside down while accelerating at full speed, using her vessel's own momentum to ram through the center of 3 Void Shaper vessels. Her hull began tearing apart from the impact, metal screaming as it was ripped away. But her weapons never stopped firing. The Bridge of Soul's Vengeance, filled with the sounds of battle reports as human ships threw themselves at the enemy with complete disregard for their own safety. Lieutenant Nakyung watched her tactical display with growing amazement as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. "Admiral, the Void Shapers are struggling to adapt," she reported, her voice filled with excitement. "Their targeting systems keep trying to predict our next moves, but there's no pattern to follow. They're actually starting to interfere with each other's firing solutions." The artificial intelligence controlling the Void Shaper fleet had been programmed to counter every logical military strategy developed over millions of years of galactic warfare. But the programmers had never encountered an opponent willing to sacrifice 3 ships just to destroy 1 enemy vessel, or pilots crazy enough to use their own ships as guided missiles. Elder Threnak watched the battle display from the medical bay, his alien features twisted with horror and fascination. Human ships were dying all around the battlefield, but each sacrifice took multiple enemy vessels with it. "Admiral," he said to Kim, his voice shaking, "your people are committing suicide just to hurt the enemy." Kim's weathered face remained stone cold as he watched another human destroyer explode after ramming a Void Shaper command ship. "No, Elder, they're winning." The battle had transformed into something beyond warfare. It became a testament to human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. Space around the combat zone filled with the twisted wreckage of both fleets, creating a metal graveyard that stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. But while the Void Shapers fought with cold mechanical precision, the humans fought with something their artificial intelligence could never understand: the desperate fury of a species that refused to give up. Lieutenant Chohai felt the temperature dropping rapidly on the bridge of her corvette. Bizon's pride. The life support systems had failed 20 minutes ago when enemy fire punched through her ship's hull, leaving jagged holes that vented atmosphere into space. Her crew of 37 had sealed themselves into their emergency environmental suits, but she could see the fear in their eyes through their helmet visors. "Ma'am, we should retreat," her weapons officer suggested over the suit's communication system. "The ship won't hold together much longer." Cho looked at her tactical display, where a massive Void Shaper manufacturing vessel was slowly turning to bring its main weapons to bear on a group of human frigates. If that factory ship survived, it would begin producing more enemy units, right? Here in the middle of the battle. "Negative," she replied, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. "We have one shot at that manufacturing node. All power to engines." Her corvette, already damaged and bleeding atmosphere, accelerated toward the enemy vessel like a guided missile. The Void Shaper's defensive systems fired continuously, tearing away pieces of her ship's hull, but Cho kept pushing forward. Just before impact, she fired every weapon her ship possessed directly into the enemy's production facility. The explosion consumed both vessels, but the Void Shaper manufacturing node died with them. Across the battlefield, Commander Ohan watched his squadron of 8 destroyers take devastating fire from a concentrated group of 50 Void Shaper vessels. The ships were outnumbered 6-1, and conventional tactics would have called for an immediate retreat. Instead, O had a different idea. "All ships form up on me," he commanded over the squadron frequency. "We're going to create a little traffic jam." His destroyers moved into a tight formation and accelerated directly toward the center of the enemy group. The Void Shapers, programmed to avoid collisions, began adjusting their positions to avoid the suicidal human charge. But O had anticipated this response. Now, he shouted, and all 8 human ships simultaneously detonated their weapons magazines. The chain reaction created a massive debris field that trapped the entire Void Shaper formation. 50 enemy vessels found themselves unable to maneuver, easy targets for the remaining human forces. O's final transmission echoed across the fleet frequency. "For Earth," Elder Threnok pressed his alien face against the viewport of the medical bay, watching the human sacrifice with growing horror and awe. His species had evolved on a peaceful world where cooperation and diplomacy solved most problems. They had never seen anything like this deliberate self-destruction in service of others. Tears began flowing down his feathered cheeks, an emotional response that his people rarely displayed, reserved only for the most profound moments of loss or beauty. "They're dying for us," he whispered to the other alien survivors. "For people they've never met, from worlds they've never seen." Captain Lee Jun's fighter had lost most of its armor and one engine when he spotted his target, the Void Shaper command vessel coordinating the enemy fleet's movements. His weapons were offline, his life support failing, but his ship's reactor was still functional. "This is Captain Lee to all human forces," he transmitted as he lined up his final approach. "Tell Earth we held the line." His damaged fighter, nothing more than a flying bomb now, punched through the enemy command ship's defenses and detonated deep inside its hull. The explosion crippled the Void Shaper coordination network, leaving hundreds of enemy vessels suddenly unable to work together effectively. The perfectly organized Void Shaper formations began falling apart under the chaotic human assault. Their artificial intelligence unable to cope with enemies who treated death as just another weapon. The bridge of Soul's Vengeance looked like a war zone. Smoke drifted through the air from damaged control panels. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and the deck was littered with debris from multiple hull breaches. Admiral Kim stood among the chaos, his uniform torn and bloodied, surveying what remained of humanity's once mighty fleet. Half of his senior staff lay dead at their stations. killed when enemy fire had penetrated the bridge's armor plating 3 hours earlier. The survivors worked frantically at damaged consoles, trying to keep their crippled flagship operational for just a few more minutes. Outside the cracked viewport, the remnants of both fleets drifted in a deadly ballet of destruction. Lieutenant Nakyung coughed violently, her lungs burning from the acrid smoke that filled the bridge. Her sensor station was barely functional, held together with emergency repairs and sheer determination.
How?
Through the static and interference, she had been tracking the enemy's movements, looking for the one target that might end this nightmare. Admiral Mulk, she called out, her voice hoarse and barely audible. I found it. The Void Shaper Command Nexus. It's that massive vessel at the center of their formation. That's what's coordinating their entire fleet. Kim nodded slowly, his weathered face grim with the knowledge of what had to be done. He had commanded fleets for 30 years, fought pirates and hostile aliens across the galaxy, but he had always known it would end like this. A final battle where victory would cost everything. Signal all remaining vessels, he ordered, his voice carrying across the damaged bridge. Initiate final protocol. The communication came back in fragments as the few surviving human ships responded. Captain Park Min's voice crackled through the static from her dying cruiser. The Dago's Thunder. Her ship had taken a direct hit to its reactor containment system and was slowly cooking itself to death from the inside. Admiral, this is Park Min, she reported, trying to sound professional despite the desperate circumstances. We've got major reactor containment failure. 17 minutes until core breach. But sir, that's perfect timing for what you're planning. Other voices joined in from across the scattered fleet. Commander Lee Su from his damaged destroyer reported weapon systems offline, but engines still functional. Captain Eugène's corvette had lost half its crew, but could still navigate, ship after ship, all of them dying, all of them ready for one final mission. Acknowledged, Kim replied. All vessels, coordinate your reactor overloads with the flagship. We're going to take every ship we have left and ram them directly into that command nexus. When we detonate simultaneously, it should be enough to destroy their coordination network entirely. Elder Threnak, who had been listening from his position near the medical station, suddenly grabbed Admiral Kim's arm with surprising strength for someone so badly injured. His large alien eyes were filled with tears and desperate pleading. Admiral, please, the elder begged. You don't have to do this. Your people could still escape in the life pods. Some of you could survive. You could return to Earth. Warn them about the threat. Kim looked down at the alien's trembling hand, then met his, eyes with a calm that seemed almost supernatural given the circumstances. For just a moment, his expression softened as he thought about the billions of humans back on Earth, living their peaceful lives without knowing that their entire fleet was about to die in a distant corner of space. Elder Threnak, Kim said, quietly, you still don't understand what it means to be human. This is what Deathworlders do. Don't run when innocent people need protection. We don't calculate acceptable losses when someone calls for help. He gently removed the alien's hand from his arm and turned toward the main viewport where the Void Shaper command vessel waited like a mechanical mountain of death. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, no matter what it costs us. Countdown began. The explosion changed the face of the galaxy forever. When the reactor cores of humanity's remaining fleet detonated simultaneously at the heart of the Void Shaper formation, the combined energy release created something that astronomers had never seen before, an artificial star that burned brighter than any sun for 17 minutes before collapsing into a beautiful nebula of glowing gas and stellar dust. The light from that brief new star was visible from 3 different solar systems, appearing suddenly in the night sky like a beacon of hope. On distant worlds, alien children pointed up at the strange new light while their parents wondered, what could have caused such a massive explosion in the depths of space? 6 hours after the detonation, rescue ships from across the galaxy began, arriving at the coordinates where 2 mighty fleets had fought their final battle. They found a graveyard unlike anything in recorded history, thousands of pieces of twisted metal, drifting through a nebula that sparkled with the remnants of destroyed starships, but scattered among the wreckage were small emergency beacons. tiny signals of life in the vast emptiness. Rescue teams worked frantically to locate the few human escape pods that had somehow survived the cataclysmic explosion. Each pod they found contained precious cargo, the handful of humans who had lived through humanity's greatest sacrifice. Commander Lee Jun was discovered floating unconscious in emergency stasis, his escape pod damaged but still functional. The rescue team that found him couldn't believe anyone had survived the destruction of his fighter. But somehow he had managed to eject seconds before the final explosion. His pod's medical systems had kept him alive during the long hours drifting through space. Lieutenant Nakyung's pod was found near the edge of the new nebula, its beacon still transmitting a message that brought tears to the eyes of every alien who heard it. Earth's ancient motto echoed through space, "Here we stand," even in the face of total destruction. The young officer had programmed her pod to keep broadcasting humanity's defiant promise to protect those who needed help. Elder Thranok survived his injuries and lived to tell the story of humanity's sacrifice. To the Galactic Council, when he stood before the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds, his voice shook with emotion as he described what he had witnessed. They asked for nothing in return, he told the silent chamber. No territorial concessions, no trade agreements, no political favors. They heard strangers calling for help across the void, and they gave everything they had to answer that call. Every ship, every life, every hope they possessed. The elder's testimony continued for hours as he described the human tactics, their willingness to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage, and their refusal to retreat even when facing impossible odds. The alien representatives listened in stunned silence as they realized they had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to be human. The vote was unanimous. Earth would be offered full membership in the Galactic Council, not as a junior partner, learning from more advanced civilizations, but as the military leaders of a new defensive alliance. Every species in the galaxy now understood that when Deathworlders responded to a crisis, they didn't just solve the immediate problem, they made sure it could never threaten anyone ever again. Captain Park So, one of only 12 human survivors, found among the wreckage, was brought before the council to accept their offer. She stood in the great assembly hall, still wearing a hospital gown over her injuries, and spoke the words that would echo throughout galactic history. "We accept your offer," she said simply, "and we'll be ready when you need us again." The void Shaper threat was ended forever, her command network destroyed, and the remaining units drifting powerlessly through space. But humanity's legend had only just begun.